Konnichiwa minasan, namaskar, and welcome to the class in the second lecture series on Introduction to Japanese Language and Culture. So, in lesson 3, we had done Ageru and morau, which is giving and receiving. Now, today we are going to do Ageru morau, of course, plus we are going to do Kureru and Kudasaru. Now, Kureru and Kudasaru mean receiving from someone. So, to understand all these verbs Ageru, morau, Kureru and Kudasaru, it is very important to understand the concept of Uchi and Soto in Japanese. So, as I told you, Ageru means to give something to someone and morau means to receive something from someone. So, you can see over here giving something, that is Ageru, and receiving something from someone is morau. Now, you can give something to anybody, but here comes Uchi and Soto. Over here it does not mean outside, it has something to do with outside with reference to someone or with reference to a certain situation. Now, you have also read that Soto is the opposite of Naka, and Naka means inside. But these two words Soto and Naka in Japanese context are used to show social behavior or interaction between groups. Now, as we have this word Soto, which is outside, we also have another word which is Uchi, home, or we could also say with reference to something inside. It could also mean your close group, people you are informal or closer to. It could also mean or refer to nation or to your kaisha where you work with reference to other companies, or also refer to social groups. There will be different levels of interaction. For example, formal interaction, informal interaction, polite or close interaction with somebody, inside the house interaction with people you know very closely, your own family members, and of course, the very formal interaction outside your own social group. So, basically, as you know, keigo is to be kept in mind when we are talking in Japanese. Now, you will remember that we did polite Japanese in restaurant expressions when you are talking to customers, as we did in restaurant expressions. You have to keep formal Japanese in mind. Now, as I was talking about Uchi earlier, so who all will be included in Uchi or in your most inner group? So, you can see here your parents will be there, your brothers, sisters, your close friends, or some people even at workplace who are close to you. Who will be in the Soto group, which is outside your close circle? That will be people outside the family. Then informal situations where you have just met them or you do not interact with them that frequently, or teachers, or at office place. So, now you see this concept of Uchi and Soto is that this is watashi, this is I. So, it is me. Then I have another group of people who are maybe my parents, brothers, sisters, friends, basically Uchi, which is close to me, which I identify with, which are immediate family, and I am informal with them. Then there is another group over here which is outside this group, with whom I do not interact that much, who are not that close to me, I am a little formal with them. In this group, I can also have people from the office who are my close associates, and I could have them in my inner group. But over here, definitely it is always people from outside your family or from not your close group. Now, this concept of having people in the inner group or having them outside your group, what language to use with them, what not to use with them, what expressions are considered formal and what expressions are considered informal. Well, this concept is a little confusing initially, especially to foreigners, even though we also in our native languages do have this formal and informal language, but still in Japanese it is very, very defined. So, if we can understand this, then verbs like Ageru, morau and Kureru are easy to relate to and easy to use in conversation. So, now let us read a small kaiwa that I have written and see how these verbs are used. So, this kaiwa is between Mira-san and Hana-chan. Of course, the picture does not show Hana and Mira over here. So, well, we can replace Hana with or Mira with rao. So, well, ii kaban desu ne, doko de kaimashita ka? So, Rao-san is saying, ii kaban desu ne, doko de kaimashita ka? Kore wa tanjoubi ni, on my tanjoubi, oni-san ni moraimashita. I received from him. Totemo suteki na iro desu. So, he says exceptionally suteki is stylish, as you know, na iro desu. It is a na adjective. Kono iro daisuki desu. So, Hana again says, I love this iro. Now, there is this verb moraimashita or morau, which means to get. E wa agemasu. A wa b ni agemasu. So, A gives. Now, here we are not mentioning whom to. Over here, A wa b ni, to B. So, this ni over here is equivalent to in English. Agemasu is give. Now, A wa b ni hon o agemasu. A gives book to B. So, A is over here, A gives. Now, A also receives, A gets. From whom? From B. So, what are we talking? We are talking about A. We are talking what A is giving and what A is receiving. A wa. So, we are talking about A. So, give is Ageru and get is morau, as you just had in your dialogue in the kaiwa in your previous slide. So, now you can practice over here and see. You have Oba-san and you have Mago. Mago is grandchild. So, who is saying? Oba-san is saying, isn't it? Watashi wa mago ni, to my grandchild. Fusen o, balloon o, fusen o agemasu or mashita. Mashita is past and agemasu is I am giving. In a similar manner, you have A and B over here, or maybe you can give them names also. So, Hana-chan and Taro. Hana-chan is saying over here, watashi wa tomodachi ni, to tomodachi, presento o agemasu. I am giving present to my friend. Or you can also say hana wa, or instead of watashi you can have any other noun like hana-chan, sensei, or oka-san. Oka-san wa, again someone else no namae, name, ni presento o agemasu. So, we have more practice. After this you will see how particle ni is used. Ni is equal to in English, and if somebody wants to understand in Hindi, well, it is ko in Hindi. Now, you have this gentleman here, Rao over here, Rao-san wa Tanaka san ni hon o agemasu. Now, Tanaka-san wa Taro-kun ni hon o agemasu. Now, you have Mariko-san. So, Taro-kun wa Mariko-san ni hon o agemasu. And what is Mariko doing? She is giving a book again to Rao-san. So, Mariko-san wa Rao-san ni hon o agemasu. So, basically this ni over here is important. With verbs like Ageru and morau, particle ni will be used, and when we are using Ageru, ni is to. With morau, what is the meaning? Let us see. So, watashi wa chichi ni hon o moraimashita. So, moraimashita is to get or receive. So, will to work over here? Please tell me, is to all right over here? It will not work. So, watashi wa chichi ni okane o moraimashita. I received money from my father. Now, you have done this word kara, which means from. So, instead of ni, if you find ni is very difficult to remember, or you are unable to use particle ni with moraimasu, then in the beginning, initially, you can use this word kara. It is easier to make sentences. For example, watashi wa haha kara dores o moraimashita. So, instead of chichi, you can again have haha or imoto or oni-san or sensei, and something instead of okane you can have any object, any mono over here, o moraimashita. So, the word can be kara also. Ni is of course used, but you can also use kara. You can replace ni with kara. Now, you have the same picture. Earlier we said watashi wa mago ni fusen o agemashita. Now, mago is saying, grandchild is saying, watashi wa oba-chan ni fusen, instead of okane fusen, o moraimashita. I received fusen from my oba-chan. So, in this manner you will use agemasu and moraimasu. So, now you can see these four are over here. So, this is Rao, Tanaka, Taro and Mariko. So, Rao-san wa Tanaka-san ni agemasu. And what is Tanaka-san doing? What can Tanaka-san say? Watashi wa, so over here, Rao-san ni moraimashita. I received from him. Now, when he is giving, watashi wa taro ni agemasu. And Taro can say similarly, watashi wa Tanaka-san ni moratta. and over here again agemasu, and if she gives to him, then it is moraimasu. Watashi wa Mariko-san ni moraimashita. Similarly, watashi wa Rao-san ni agemasu. Who is saying? Mariko is saying. But if Mariko gets from Rao-san, then what will Mariko say? Watashi wa Rao-san ni moraimashita. Please remember to use agemasu, ageru and morau properly. To make it simple, kara can be used over here and ni can be used over here. Now you can practice. Look at the picture. Rao-san is asking Mariko, Mira, ii kamera desu ne? Hai, oni-san ni moraimashita. Oni-san kara moraimashita. Oni-san ni moraimashita. Similarly over here, let us see what the kaiwa is. Suteki na kaban desu ne. A very stylish bag. Itsu kaimashita ka? When did you buy it? Ah, kore desu ka? Are you talking about this bag over here? One-san ni moraimashita. So I have got it from my elder sister. Now there is more practice for you. Dare ni moraimashita ka? Whom? From whom did you get it? Dare ni moraimashita ka? Oka-san ni moraimashita. He is thinking about his mother and saying Oka-san ni moraimashita. Now he is giving something to his mother. So A-san and B-san are talking. Kekkon kinenbi, marriage anniversary ni Oka-san ni to Oka-san nani o agemashita ka? What did you give? Oka-san wa shousetsu ga suki desu kara. She likes novels. Desu kara, thus shousetsu o agemashita. I gave her books. Till now it was all about giving and receiving. Now who is giving and who is receiving? So our subject is the person who is receiving and the person who is giving something to someone. Now we will do it from the point of view of the receiver. Now who is receiving it and what is the verb going to be? Well, the verb is kureru. So now you saw just now A gives ageru. Watashi wa Oka-san ni agemasu. Watashi wa Oka-san kara moraimasu. But what about when Oka-san is giving something to me or I am receiving something from Oka-san? So, or haha kara moraimashita is what you have done, or haha wa watashi ni kuremashita. So, haha is the one who is going to be giving and who is receiving? I am receiving. So, the verbs completely change. Agemasu is like this, moraimasu is again I am receiving, and over here I am there, but I am receiving from this person. So, basically this person is giving me and I am receiving. So, the verb is kureru. So, now you can practice this. Rao-san is asking Mira. Mira is taking pictures so well. Dare ni moraimashita ka? Oni-san wa watashi ni to me kuremashita. So, Oni-san has given this to me. Kuremasu is to give someone. Now, kuremasu is when you put yourself over here and the person is giving it to you like this, that is kuremasu. You can see very clearly. Oni-san wa watashi ni kaban o kuremashita. So, ii kaban desu ne. Dare ni moraimashita ka? Oni-san wa watashi ni kaban o kuremashita. Or doko de kaimashita ka? Iie, kaimasen deshita. Oni-san wa watashi ni kuremashita. So he has given it to me. I have not bought it. I am not explaining each and every line, as I am sure by now everything is very clear. So now you can see over here verb ageru is used when I or we give something to you, him or her, or you give to him or her, or he or she gives to him or her. For example, watashi Tanaka-san, Oto-san wa to someone, maybe Mira, tomodachi ni agemasu is give. And similarly, when are you going to use morau? Exactly in that manner when you receive from someone or someone else receives from someone else. So, watashi Tanaka-san, Oto-san wa Mira and tomodachi ni moraimasu. Now you have kureru, and kureru is when someone gives something to you or to someone else. So, you can see very clearly someone is giving you or to us, or someone else is giving to her or she, or he or she gives to him or her. So, again, as we have practiced, make some sentences and it will be very easy. Tanaka-san, Oto-san wa Mira kare tomodachi ni kureta. Kare is he. Kanojo is she. And karera is they. Tanaka-san wa Mira-san ni kuremashita. Oto-san wa Mira-san ni jisho o kuremashita. Oto-san wa watashi ni 1,000,000 yen o kuremashita. He gave me 10,000 yen. Or bucho wa watashi ni wine o kuremashita. Bucho gave to me. So, he gave me a wine bottle. Now, you have practice over here for kuremasu. So, Oto-san wa watashi ni tokei o kuremashita. He gave me a tokei. So, he gave me a, Oto-san gave me, Oto-san wa. It is not watashi wa. Watashi wa. No, it is Oto-san wa. Watashi ni, to me. Then you have another one, same picture. Sensei wa watashi ni jisho o kuremashita. So, sensei gave me a jisho. Now, these three verbs also have their honorific counterparts and are used to show respect. So, these verbs are basically used with seniors in formal situations, people who are older to you in age and in rank. The honorific counterparts of ageru, morau and kureru we will do in our next lesson. We will practice more now. Tanaka-san wa watashi ni hana o kuremashita. You can make out from the picture. Then jisho is there. So, sensei wa watashi ni jisho o kuremashita. We had this example earlier as well. Now, the reason for putting it over here is Ewa jiten. Please remember English, Japanese dictionary. Though we all say Nihongo no jisho, this is a literal translation of Japanese dictionary from English. So, in Japanese you would say either jisho o kuremashita or Ewa jiten o kuremashita, not Nihongo no jisho o kuremashita. I have written it purposely over here so that you remember it. Now, if it is a Japanese English dictionary, then it is Wae jiten, Japanese English dictionary. So, Japanese word into English and English words to Japanese. Now, sensei wa watashi ni tokei o kureta. Again, I have written kureta also and kuremashita also over here, so that you understand that both are exactly the same, only this is informal and this is formal or normal conversation in mass form. Both mean exactly the same. Where to use is different, whom to use it with is different. So, sensei wa watashi ni to me. Now, let us see what we have here. Tomodachi no oni-san ga watashi ni, what are you going to use now? Tell me, what is the verb, ageru, kureru or morau? So, tomodachi no oni-san ga, or if I put wa over here, then tomodachi no oni-san wa watashi ni, to me, something o kureru. So, what is the kaiwa that you can make from here? Kore wa dare no boshi desu ka? You can see the boshi over here. Kore wa dare no boshi desu ka? Kore wa watashi no boshi desu. It's mine. Doko de kaimashita ka? Tomodachi no oni-san ga watashi ni kuremashita. So, this is the kaiwa that you can make. He can also say, doko de kaimashita ka? Kaimasen deshita. Tomodachi no oni-san ga watashi ni kuremashita. So, this is how you will use kuremasu, and previously we had done agemasu and moraimasu as well. Make some more sentences on your own, and I am sure you will become comfortable with kuremasu and moraimasu, agemasu. Now, there are some kanjis for you today, some very simple kanjis. So, this is onna, and onna no hito is o na no hito. This kanji you have done for person, onna no hito. Now, how is it going to be made? This is ku, then katakana no and ichi. So, ku and no and ichi. That is how you would make onna no hito. This is the pictogram. Well, you can remember it any which way you want. You can say ku no ichi, one way to remember this, or you can remember this picture and then draw the pictogram. In a similar manner, you have kodomo, so the strokes are 3. How are the strokes 3 now? 1, 2 and 3. This is ko of kodomo. So, domo we are not doing at the moment, we are just doing ko over here. It is a 3-stroke character, and so is onna. Now, if you join these two, then it becomes suki. So, this is onna, this is kodomo. So, a mother likes her child the most, so it is suki, which is like, and this character you have done dai and then suki like this, like you very much, daisuki, very very liked or loved. Then now danse is very clear, otoko. So, this is a field and men would be working in the field. Why? Because chikara is required, lot of strength is required. So, from the field, from this character and chikara over here, this is the kanji for chikara, which is strength, otoko is made. Otoko, otoko means man. You can very well see from here. Then otoko no kono hito, person. This is an easy way to remember. Then we have iro. Iro is like this over here. This is not the correct stroke order. So, let me make it once again like this. Now, if you put two colors together, you have two dots, this is how it is going to mix. If you just try to sort of put a stick into it and move it a little, this is what is going to be made like this. So, one color is this and one color is this, it will just get mixed up. So, that is iro. Now, there is a little more over here. You had done oni-san. It is a good way of remembering oni-san, and you can see it from this picture also over here. Oni-san talks too much. So, from his kuchi, oni-san. This is used for legs also. So, you will have it in other kanji characters as well. So, kuchi and over here oni-san. So, together it makes oni-san who talks too much. He has a big mouth. And then one-san, one-san is very stylish. Why? Because she lives in the city. So, you have done this character for onna no hito, and then this is the character for she, which is city. So, together it will make one-san, who is very, very stylish as she lives in the city. Then this is imoto. Imoto, now this is also quite interesting. Together it will make imoto. So, a girl standing next to a tree like this, and the tree is not a full grown tree. It is a small tree and the girl is still very young. So, imoto. And then you have kaimasu. So, this is a verb. This is eyes, again eyes, and then you are walking. So, you choose with your eyes, do proper shopping with eyes and take it back home. Maybe choose your fish and put it in a basket and go home. That is how you would make this character for kau, ka and u, meaning to buy. So, now I have this very small kaiwa today, which a student of mine has written. I want you to read it. I am not giving you the Roman. Just read it and see how many kanjis you can figure out, write them, practice your hiragana, and I will give the Roman in your next class, where we are going to do the honorifics of agemasu and moraimasu and kuremasu. So, you have couple of more exercises, practice those with your partner, and I am sure that your agemasu, moraimasu and kuremasu will definitely be better after the practice, and you will be able to use it very freely in your conversation. So, with this I would like to end our class today. You have learnt how to use agemasu, moraimasu and kuremasu. I have given you a lot of examples, lot of practice today, and I hope that all three verbs which are important and used in daily conversation are clear. Make some sentences at home, read the kaiwa which I have given you right at the end, and we will meet again very soon in our next lesson with lot of other new things. Soredewa minasan, mata aimashou. Arigatou gozaimasu.